Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the session. We're just going to give everybody a short while to come on into the meeting room. Hopefully you can see myself and Trent McLaren on the screen, a nice still image of Rowan there. So if you can see and hear us, just pop something in the chat box. Let us know we're coming through okay, and we're going to be good to go in a minute or so. But I hope everybody's having a good week. Excellent. We're coming through. So they can hear me anyway, Trent. I don't know about you.
I can definitely hear you, mate. You're loud and clear.
Excellent. Good stuff. Let's just get slides and things ready to go. So how are we doing?
Yeah, it looks good.
Another 30 seconds and we will we'll get cracking. So good morning to everybody that's joining us. Thank you for taking some time out of your morning to join Trent and I this morning for this session, or this afternoon now, 12:30.
It is technically the afternoon. Quick question: have you read every single book in that library?
Yep, from cover to cover. Right, let's get cracking. Again, good morning for those that have just joined. Thank you for joining us this morning. We are going to be talking about creating high quality onboarding experiences. This is the App Advisory Plus App of the Month webinar, and we're delighted that Practice Ignition are joining us today. For those that don't know me, my name is Will Farnell. I'm founder at Farnell Clark, but also co-founder and director of App Advisory Plus. And I'm delighted today to be reunited with an old friend of mine, Trent McLaren. Good morning, Trent.
Good afternoon, Will. How are you, mate?
Good morning again. Yeah, you see, we're so used to running these in the morning. But do you want to just, for those that don't know who you are, just give a brief introduction of who you are, where you've been, and so on?
Yeah, sounds good. So, as Will said, my name's Trent. I've been in and around the accounting industry for nearly 8 years. Fortunate to work in and alongside all and the major tech accounting cloud players. So, Xero's. Spent a few years at Intuit. I've spent 3.5 years at Practice Ignition. I love it. It's super fun. I've been able to see that from a North American perspective. I've spent 2.5 years living in the UK. 2 years in the UK. And obviously I was born and raised in Australia. So I spent a lot of time in Australia, as you can probably tell by this thick accent. And that's me. I was fortunate to pick up an award in 2017. I picked up Thought Leader of the Year in the accounting industry. And that was just based on the submission that was put through, but also my contributions to the Australian accounting industry for that particular 12-month period. And that specific award actually allowed me to then start speaking all over the world. So I was speaking in Europe, UK, America, supposed to speak in Canada, never got there in the end, South Africa. So yeah, it's been a bit of a journey, a bit of a wild ride that I'm absolutely loving, and which is also why I'm here in the UK. It's all that momentum that kind of happened around that time back in 2017.
Yeah, brilliant. We're pleased to have you here, Trent. So the session today, it's all about onboarding, and onboarding is one of these areas that we get bogged down with kind of admin, and certainly when I was growing Farnell Clark, I realized fairly early on that actually you kind of only get one opportunity to make a great first impression. And when you take on a new client, it's the point of the engagement that everything has to work, because it's going to set the tone for everything else that happens. And we went through a whole load of phases in terms of how do we make this work and how do we get it right. So the session today, we're going to talk about why onboarding is important. What's the right approach? Trent talks to lots of firms about this, so has some really good insights. And I think what's really important is certainly for us in terms of what we did at Farnell Clark. We worked really closely with the Seat Bank very early on, and the Seat Bank kind of came in and helped us understand the importance of getting onboarding right in terms of how they manage that process as a tech provider. And I think there's a huge amount that we can learn from software vendors around getting that onboarding process right. So I'm hoping that Trent's going to be able to share some of his experiences there. And also, how do we use onboarding to kind of set those initial expectations for clients? And how do we make sure that the things that we go through at the beginning set the tone for the engagement as it evolves, but also giving clients an understanding of what kind of experience they can expect from our accounting firm? So that's kind of what we're going to talk about, Trent. Before we do that, do you want to just give us a brief overview in terms of, just in case anybody doesn't know, who Practice Ignition are, and how particularly that you kind of help firms with this onboarding challenge?
Sure. Yeah, no, would love to. So Practice Ignition was one of those original, one of those apps that came in around the time that Receipt Bank existed way back in the day. It was founded by a gentleman named Guy Pearson. So he was an accountant in practice that saw the opportunity in that ecosystem, and he wanted to make a difference for accountants globally. And he was trying to figure out, what is that impact I can have? Where can I make that impact? And he understood the pains around engagements, getting paid, proposals, and decided, okay, there's nothing that exists like Practice Ignition. I need to then go and build it. With Practice Ignition being that it was to ignite that practice, like if it's as silly as it potentially sounds, but that's where a lot of that name originally came from, is that they wanted Practice Ignition to be the hub of things that help spark the rest of the practice. If you look at it, fast forward 7 or 8 years now, we're 145 odd staff, just close to 4,000 accounting firms worldwide that use the platform. It's very much focused on your revenue under management. So creating a digital relationship is where Practice Ignition helps you get started. So that onboarding piece of, here's your proposal, here's your fees, collecting a payment within the proposal, you then have a dashboard and hub to show, where does all my revenue live and how does that connect into my invoicing, my jobs, my workflow. So it is the beginning and end of every client relationship, but it's also managing that relationship throughout the journey, all the scope changes, the fee increases, the renewals, and everything that comes along the way. So it's definitely evolved more than just being a proposal engagement letter tool, but that was the pain that we started from. That's where we began back in 2013. If you look at it today, there's so much more that we've tried to take in and encompass on the pains in and around getting a client to, or, being able to create that engagement letter in a few minutes. It's what happens next. That's always the big thing we ask.
Yeah, cool. So what does onboarding mean to you? So if you think of, because we talk about onboarding, it's kind of been a buzzword over the last, 10 years or whatever. But what does it mean?
It's integrating someone new into your processes, right? It's like, it's a combination of two things becoming one. So 1 minute you've got a lead and a prospect, and now you need them to help become a customer, and you want them to be a good customer. So onboarding is actually just about developing a process to get them from lead to customer, but then from customer to satisfied, right? So it's like, if they become a customer today, what are we doing with them for the next 90 days to help make sure that they are integrated really seamlessly into our processes, get to know our team, they understand the rules of working, our rules of engagement for working together. All of that encompasses under onboarding. So as much as onboarding is this big, like, vague thing at the top, everything that stems under that is the rules and the relationships that bring these things together, and how do we speed that up so that it happens effectively with the right resources, where we're not overspending or misallocating the people to wrong things.
Yeah, and I think a couple of points in there that I'll pick up on that you made that are kind of really interesting. So we did, Rowan and I did a session with a company called Zama Technology a couple of weeks ago, and they've built some technology that almost kind of helps with the AML bit of onboarding, that kind of really admin bit, because I talk to a lot of firms and we talk about onboarding, and they say, how do you automate onboarding? And it's a big thing. I mean, you said it's kind of 90 days, and it's interesting because we run our onboarding process over 3 months, what we call our welcome team. We'll talk about that in a moment. But like the AML bit is like one bit, but it's all of the little admin steps that have to happen between different elements, and they built some technology that enables you to kind of connect some of those bits up and do some of the heavy lifting in terms of self-serve AML and so on. And when we did that session, it's really important. We kind of clarified when we talk about onboarding, what bit are we talking about? Because as you say, it's a long-term bit, but it's the point at which we set the expectations. And the other point I want to pick up on is you talking about getting people to understand the rules of engagement. And I think it's a real challenge for lots of accounting firms to be bold enough to kind of dictate that process. And one of the things that I talk to firms about a lot is that as accountants, we've got to control that process. PI gives you the ability to kind of get into fixed fees and everything else. And if firms are trying to deliver work to fixed fees, if you're not controlling the process of what you do, you don't get to control the profitability of the work either, do you?
No, you blow out your whip. And so what you've tried to charge everyone for a certain fee is no longer relevant, and then you've got this debacle of profitable and non-profitable clients. I think for a lot of accounting firms, there has to be. We need to write this down on paper. Like, what do we actually want to stand for? What are our values? What do we want to be about? Which then ties into how do we then set rules of engagement? Because if you don't have your own rules and structure for how the business and the firm works, how do you then go and try and do that for other elements of your business, whether it's onboarding or, we could talk about any function of an accounting firm where, you've probably seen it, I've seen it, where implementation just doesn't happen and clients just kind of go and do whatever they want. And then when you ask a team member, what are the different rules? Like, what are you recommending? What do you do? And they've all got a different answer because we're not clearly defining that as a group, as a business. What does this look like and how do we push forward? So yeah, it's really important, but it starts with having those fundamentals and those core elements down pat first, I think.
Yeah, and the time frame again gives an indication of kind of the importance of this as a process. So you said 90 days, and when we take on a new client, they work with our kind of welcome team, and they work with them for 3 months. And it's almost that, yes, there's all that kind of admin stuff we've got to do, clearance letters and AML and setting jobs up and all of that, but it's actually about just building the foundations of that relationship, because the onboarding bit is the foundations, isn't it? If you get the onboarding wrong, you're creating problems for yourself further down the road.
The big thing that we probably should call out here is the reason everyone focuses on 90 days is because that's where we best measure our churn. Like, when does our churn of new customers increase or decrease? And we know that if we nail that first 90 days and get them into repetitive behaviors and they're used to working with us, then the churn or the likelihood of them churning decreases a lot. A lot of software companies do it and measure it exactly like that. And I think this is why it overlaps into the accounting industry, because you get all these tech companies saying, well, and it's probably not just tech, but I think most businesses in that high growth, fast performing measured churn ridiculously, even though it's something that doesn't necessarily happen a lot in accounting firms, because unless you really piss someone off, like you only speak to them maybe once or twice a year, right? Like, they're just like, oh, that's just my accountant. And it gives accountants a bad name, I think, as well, because people just tolerate it. So when they find someone that's really, really good, or they see an experience that was really, really good, like, oh, mate, you've got to meet my accountant. They are awesome. Just because they, gave me a digital signature as opposed to forcing me to print something off and sign it and send it to them.
Yeah, and I think the point there in terms of the way that as a tech firm, and this is the point, is what can we as accountants learn from tech businesses, and that churn thing for you is kind of right, because you've got people, you want them to engage with your product very efficiently very early on. And I know you've said before to me in a conversation that it's about how soon does the wow moment happen, and anything that you can do to kind of bring that forward. So it's at that point the client says, oh yeah, this is really good. And I think that's where the translation happens in terms of what we're trying to do as an accounting firm as well. We still want that wow moment to happen, because it's about building those foundations. Yeah, we're not going to churn clients in 3 months unless you do something fundamentally dumb, and I've done a few of those in the past as well, because it's this whole point that when I was growing my firm, kind of its most challenging point, when we had about 9 members of staff and we were taking on 30 clients a month, it's like 30 sets of clearance letters HMRC authorities and everything else. That's a lot of balls to be juggling in the air. When you drop some, and you do lose people, you get that churn. But for us now, it's about setting the foundations and getting that wow moment really early, because that sets the expectation for the engagement and everything else. So I think there is that kind of direct crossover in terms of we're trying to achieve the same outcome as you are as a tech business in terms of avoiding churn, but we're taking a longer term view of reducing the likelihood of that churn later down the road. Does that make sense?
It definitely does. I mean, the big thing there, like satisfied customers, that's what we want. We want people to be satisfied with the work that we're providing them. We want to be able to actually make sure we're solving their problem. At that point, a lot of those things typically lead to better revenue as well. If you've got satisfied, happy customers, then you typically make more money as a result, or they're less likely to be concerned with things like fee increases, or if you are a little bit more expensive, because they get what you do. The other element is to have, you always keep an eye on your churn, even if it's always really, really low. But if it creeps up just a little bit every single month, then you start to go, well, why is that happening? So you're measuring two ends at that sense. But a lot of people think client onboarding also, where does it start? Does it start when they become a customer, or does it start the moment they hit your website? Does it start the moment that they get that first email from you or your team, and the language that's used in that email, or the phone call, or when they visit the office, or a lot of that? Then we start talking about client experience. So, client onboarding is how we integrate them in, but getting that experience perfect and right for your clients starts much, much sooner than that. A lot of people, I don't think about that. They're like, oh, I just want to automate this engagement. I want to send that. And, then I want this, the invoice to happen. And then we're going to do the AML part or whatever it is. A lot of people get lost and start chasing that shiny, no, don't worry about that other fluffy stuff. That's crap.
Yeah. But this is where the importance of clarity over kind of vision proposition and value proposition for firms is really important, isn't it? Because this onboarding bit is the translation of that vision into real life experiences. And you mentioned, I talk about client experience, you've mentioned client experience, and that's the point, isn't it? That's a differentiator for firms now, is what does that client experience feel like? How do you make a client feel from the first touch point to the last touch point? And the onboarding is the first exposure that clients get to that vision and value that they might have seen on the website or picked up from the email. And it highlights the importance of consistency of value proposition for firms, and it's really easy to kind of just think, yeah, that's all kind of management mumbo jumbo, we don't really need to think about vision and values and everything else. But with consumers today, it's what encourages people to buy, isn't it? It drives those buying decisions.
They talk about it when it's really, really good. They talk about it, and if it's really crap, they'll, how's your account? Like, oh yeah, just like every account. Like, it's like we get bundled into that, and it's not where we want it to be. The easiest example I can give to a lot of people, that if you've never seen this in an accounting firm, but something you can probably relate it to, is when you step into a really nice sort of fancy restaurant for the first time, right? The experience doesn't start the moment you walk in the door. It actually kind of starts again before that. The moment you make the reservation, you get that automated SMS. Maybe it's a phone call. You walk in, people take your jacket, they show you to your seat, they check that, that it smells nice, it's lovely lighting, there's really nice music, and you think, yeah, this is, you already tell, like, I'm going to pay a lot for this. I can tell just before I've even sat down and ordered the food.
And you're probably subconsciously as well, aren't you? You've already made the decision that whatever the food's like, it's going to be really good, because everything else has set the expectation, hasn't it?
Yeah. And that's why, again, to the same point, it's not just about having, and again, this is going to sound funny for me, it's not just about having like fancy tech to make you look good. You need everything else around that, the process, to help complement this experience you're trying to build out. The tech will help you look really, really good at the end of that if you've got everything else right. There's multiple, we talked about people, process, and tech a lot. I know you and I have talked about that quite a lot over the years. That still plays a really crucial role in this element, because there's too many touch points and gaps where things don't just get systemized, and your client wants to speak to someone at some point. You can't just have a robot at the front, in the middle, and at the back. They want to speak to someone up front. They want that touch point in the middle to understand what's going on and who can explain it for me. And they're going to want that touch point towards the end as well, when they think, you know what, we are, for whatever reason, we've moved on, or we're older, or whatever it is. Yeah, how you get to A to B is the tech part, that you need to have a human touch point at point A and point B to bring it all home and bring it together.
Yep. Cool. Just a couple of things I didn't say at the beginning, everybody. If you've got any questions, we'd love to take them. So do drop them into the Q&A box for us, and we'll get to those as they appear. So I mean, we've probably answered this to a degree, Trent. But if in a succinct way, why is onboarding so important?
Well, I mean, why is it not important? Like, if you flip it around that way, what would happen if you didn't have a good onboarding experience? Your process is rubbish. Your client, you just said this before when you mentioned bringing on 30 clients and not having strict processes on how do we do clearance letters, HMRC, like all those. You drop too many balls.
Yeah.
You're an unorganized chaos mess. So onboarding becomes really important, because you're trying to have a smooth welcome. Hey, we're fantastic. Even if it looks like we're fantastic here, I promise it's just as fantastic behind the scenes, and it's not it's not just a pretty face or whatever it is. So yeah, client onboarding helps streamline and smooth out your process and keep those client relationships in check, if I'm honest. Like, that's the key thing. You want people to feel like they are part of something. They know exactly how to interact with you, and what's appropriate, right? They're the key things.
Yeah, and if we kind of think a bit more about kind of what we can learn from tech businesses, so for us, as I Receipt Bank came in and were very generous with kind of their time and support back in, I don't know, 2013 or whatever it was, and almost kind of helped us map out what this onboarding process should look like. I mean, clearly they had a vested interest in doing it because they wanted us to be onboarding clients onto Receipt Bank, which was kind of fine. That was part of the process. But I mean, you've worked in a bunch of tech businesses, and we've talked about the churn bit. But what else do you see that accountants can take from tech businesses that really kind of have this onboarding thing nailed?
I mean, I feel like we've talked around it a little bit already in bits and pieces, but I think even just come back to that people, process, tech part. People, there's a lot of focus on the development, what their roles and responsibilities are, who does what at what stages. Like, that's all really clear in tech companies, right? Sometimes smaller ones, there's a lot more diversity in that you can be both the salesperson and the marketing guy and the person that's doing the admin as well. And I think that's super relevant for smaller firms too. You're going to have people that do multiple things, but it's important that you recognize them for that as well. Don't just expect that they can do that. And what's the life? How long? What's the life cycle of that? How long can they last doing those things? And when you take them off that, this is just, what I'm really saying is, how do you care about the people that you're putting into those roles and their development and their progression? When you start thinking about the tech's good for, like, it evolves all the time. So even though you might buy something today, 2, 3, 4 years time, there might be something better, right? Or something integrated to another thing. I think we've seen that with both Xero, with Intuit starting to, and Sage even releasing these features that were add-ons once upon a time, or if anything, buying add-ons to build into their product. And you get to that same point of like, well, when does it make sense that I stop using one and just start doing everything all in one? I think there will be a consolidation at some point in that sense, because we've been so add-on focused, like as in so many different like modules of things, but there's more of that coming together into one platform.
Yeah. What do you think is the right balance between technology and the human kind of part of onboarding? Because obviously it's really easy to get kind of absorbed into the tech bubble. But we're professional accountants, we're people, and as more of what we do gets commoditized, the human input becomes more and more important. So we're still talking onboarding here, but I mean, how do firms get the balance right in terms of using tech, but making sure that there's kind of that human touch?
Don't try to automate things that are highly valuable to your client, right? Automate the things they don't care about. But the things that they seem as important, don't try and automate that part unless you're trying to improve the process, improve the experience, and increase their value of that particular thing. because that's when it starts to happen. People are like, oh, I just want to send out automatic emails because I don't want to write that email myself, which is okay as long as your client still doesn't see the value in that. Think, yeah, cool, it's just an update. I don't need that to be personalized or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
You got to focus on what's important to them and then build that into the process.
Okay. And I mean, you've seen lots of firms who clearly would have gone through a process and fundamentally transformed their onboarding process. Is the have you got kind of a couple of examples in terms of what that's looked like and what the outcome is for firms that have done this really, really well?
Yeah, so the big thing to even start to map, we would always recommend doing a process mapping type session. So being able to say, well, based on what you do now, tell me every single step and let's draw some lines as to what's connected, what's disconnected, what's a human process or a human touch versus a tech touch. And we'll do that for almost the first, to your point, 30, 60 days. So what happens before they sign on, which is typically a week to 2 weeks normally, right? Like that's your average cycle. You've called someone, you've done the meeting, etc. 2 weeks, 30, 60 days. Once you've then mapped all that out, it gives you a lot better idea as to go, well, what else should we be doing at different points? When they've booked in a meeting, do we automatically send them a reminder? Do we capture their coffee order up front so that when they walk in the door, we know what coffee they wanted? Once they've signed that proposal, do we automatically send them an SMS? Do we automatically email them that day, a week later, with training guides and modules on the things that they signed up for? Or requesting, does it trigger your AML form automatically? Are we doing that up front? Like these are all the different things you can think about and map out and build like a cake. What do we want to go at what point? How do we lay it all flat, looking at oversight view of it? And then progressing. It's going to be, you're going to tweak and iterate. Back to my point before, as things improve and change. We released a feature recently that that 3-option pricing piece, right? And it basically just means you can have 3 different pricing options in one for the client to view before they accept and move forward. But for a lot of firms, they had to go back and revisit, well, how do we talk about pricing at the moment? Because some of them are doing that in slideshows, right? They're doing it way earlier in the piece. But now they're actually having to cut out a whole bunch of steps in their onboarding or in that, even the negotiation piece, to bring that further forward. So that cut down, 3 or 4 different apps. They weren't having to zap to anything. They weren't having to spend time building out presentations anymore.
And I mean, you mentioned Zaps there, and I know that from a PI perspective, your Zapier integration's kind of been a big step in terms of enabling automation of much more of the onboarding process, and it's enabled firms to do some kind of really cool stuff with integrating different products and stuff. What are you most excited about in terms of the next, I don't know, 2 years? What's going to kind of really kick this up a level in terms of the way that accountants work with clients using tech, and whether it's onboarding or whether it goes kind of beyond that? I mean, you have a really good insight into kind of what's going on around the world. So we're kind of getting close to the half an hour. So I mean, what's the big thing that kind of excites you, or do you think is the big opportunities over the next couple of years?
I think it'll be improved client interactions. I think you've seen a lot of apps they're bringing in, email comms, Slack integrations, SMS, video calling. I'm seeing a lot of that getting brought into different apps as well. I think improving those client interactions at different points and giving them more ways to connect. I think through COVID, the big thing is that our use of video is just dramatically, gone through the roof. I think we'll end up seeing a bit more of a blend on how we communicate in many different ways. And that's where you'll see a lot, because things do move quite slowly. So like, what you see in the next 6 to 12 months will be still focused around that, but then it's how do we layer on top of that again? That becomes the interesting point. Being able to book meetings automatically and have that scheduled to go out every single month or quarter, and that would have the relevant Zoom link, and then that would float my CRM. My team would be able to see all that communication in one place. So whenever we think about where do we see that happening in the future, I think it's very much similar to what we're doing now, but enhanced.
Yeah.
How do we enhance and improve the way we interact so we have better conversations, add more value, provide better insights, better data?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think that's a really indicative of kind of what certainly for me the last 5 years have been about, which is a much greater focus on client experience and what clients get, and all of the things you talked about there were all about enhanced experiences for clients, better communication, better engagement. So that is kind of really interesting that's becoming the focus, and we've gone beyond the technology being the focus, which is kind of what I saw 5 years ago when everyone was jumping onto cloud GLs and everything. It kind of suggests that we're getting to the point where those firms at the front of the curve have got really comfortable with the tech, and they're now looking at what the opportunities the tech delivers.
There's a few parts there that tech companies look at. They think about how do we, there's 3 elements to it, I guess. There's commerciality, viability, desirability. So like commercially, does this make sense? Is it a viable thing? Can we build it? And the customers actually want it. Like, are we solving a big enough pain and problem? So my gripe with the industry or the tech companies is seeing the stuff that they build that leans too heavily on commercial and not enough on desirable, on the desire side. So we're building things that customers don't want is the real simple way to say it. Yeah. And the companies that get it right will build things that customers do want and they're happy to pay for. And that's why you hear a lot of companies say, we listen to our customers. You're bloody smart to listen to your customers because they're the ones that are paying the bill at the end of the day. So you have to then take a thing out, well, what are they having the biggest challenges with? Whether it's in PI, we're going to think, well, where does that problem start and what do we want to dive into? A lot of people ask if we're going to jump into workflow or we're going to jump into all these different things. And workflow's never been something we've been interested in, but we want to push further the other way up the value chain. How do we help bring people on sooner and create that experience and bring that experience further forward? At the same point, if you wanted to do email, I've heard Guy talk about this a few years ago. If you wanted to send out an email campaign saying, hey, promotional offer on advisory, it's going to be 20% off for 4 months. Anyone that opts into that email could automatically update the scope of work, update the payment schedule and their engagement letter, all from that click of, I'm interested. And then trigger all the boring stuff that we don't care about behind the scenes. But the value part being, I really want what you're offering. And that's, back to communication, right? So how do we communicate better and then automate all the work, the admin work that has to happen behind the scenes?
Cool. And before we wrap up, anything that PI have got kind of lined up that you're really excited about that you can talk about yet?
It's always a good question. I'm typically the one that gets in trouble first for speaking too soon. But we have got things that have launched that I can talk about, which is good. The new proposal editor that we launched was really cool. That was fundamentally a big rebuild on the entire product in the way that we build proposals out. As part of that, you can now build 3-option pricing. So if you've been following Mark Wickisham's cloud pricing and his coaching and those sorts of things in the years, you can now deliver that 3-option pricing experience for your clients to pick an option that automatically sets the billing schedule, the payment schedule, will then raise and reconcile every invoice on the back of that as well. So I think between the proposal editor, which allows for just a more complex billing arrangement, if it's twice quarterly, biannual, 3 times over 3, like you can just, however crazy you want to go with it, you can. The payment system can then pick up and build on whatever that complex billing structure was. So trying to I don't know why this happens, but trying to let accountants build in all the fun and different ways that they want to without us saying, oh no, you can only do it in fixed fees or you can only do it in one pricing. It's like, cool, you can do 1 price, you can do 3 prices, you can do hourly, quarterly, you can do, fixed twice annually. It's, you do whatever you need to do, basically.
Yeah, cool. Excellent. So in terms of starting to wrap up, if anybody's got any questions, do pop them in Q&A. But key takeaways, really. So firstly, Thanks, Trent. You and I always kind of have really interesting conversations. I love having conversations with you and kind of picking into your insights in terms of what you see across the profession globally. But in terms of some of the things we've talked about here and key takeaways when it comes to onboarding specifically. So think about what that period is. Is it 30 days? Is it 60 days, 90 days, 6 months? What works for you and your clients? Think about mapping out those processes. Build in ways that you can make sure you're setting client expectations, making sure they're communicated and people understand them. Look at those areas that can be improved. Where are the balls being dropped? Which of the bits can you effectively automate without necessarily kind of taking away from that really important human input? It's really important you commit resource to the onboarding process. So when we started it, we put a dedicated person in there to kind of run that onboarding process, provide that weekly contact with a client over the first 3 months. Rowan, one of our directors at App Advisory Plus, has already done a fair amount of work with a number of firms around building Zapier integrations and automating some of that onboarding process. So we're very happy to have conversations, log a support ticket, and Rowan can share some of the things that he's done with firms around that. I have got a couple of bits popped up in the chat box here. Trent's already picked those up. So thank you for joining. Obviously somewhere that isn't in the UK, I'm guessing from the comments there, Trent.
Yeah, so Jacqueline is actually based in Sydney, and fun story, Jacqueline's son was one of Guy's, I would say, first clients back in the accounting firm back in Sydney. So yeah, every now and then Jacqueline will be on a webinar, just hanging out. It's always good to catch up and see her here.
Well, we really appreciate you joining, Jacqueline. Thanks for joining us at some bizarre hour of the day, I'm sure. No other questions in there. So all that's left for me to say is thank you very much indeed for joining us, Trent. Thanks to Practice Ignition for supporting App Advisory Plus when we launched last year and coming on as a founder app. Really appreciate it. I hope that we've provided a bit of clarity around what onboarding is, why it's important, and I think it's really worth looking at what really good tech providers do in terms of bringing new users on board and looking at what you can take from that and deploy in your accounting firm to build those really positive client experiences from kind of day -10 really, whenever it is you first get that engagement with a client. And remember that when we talk about client experience, we're talking about the lifetime value of those client touch points, from the first to the last. How do you make each one of those really brilliant and memorable for your clients? So on that point, thank you very much indeed for taking time out to join us this afternoon. Thank you, Trent, for your inputs as ever. If anybody's got any questions, do get in touch with Trent, myself, or Rowan, and enjoy your afternoon. Thanks very much. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. See you later.
Take care.